Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jed Lee. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful historical neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very, very honored and absolutely delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in that mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Audible, CastBox, Player FM, wherever you find your favorite shows. We have a wonderful, wonderful show lined up for you today. Later on in the show, we're going to preview one of the mini podcasts in our podcast family, Guardians of the Game. But first, Nathan Fairbairn and Michelle Assarasakorn return to the podcast to celebrate Hazel Has Her Hands Full. It's the latest in their Paws graphic novel series. And then Eden Estabrook returns to the show to celebrate Arnie the Armadillo Goes Backpacking in Brazil. Are you looking for a creative way to bond with your kids? Let me tell you all about Drawing with Your Kids, the ultimate destination for artistic adventures. Join us as we dive into the wonderful world of children's books with renowned illustrators guiding you step by step. From beloved characters to whimsical scenes, unleash your imagination and create cherished memories together. Whether you're a seasoned artist or just picking up a pencil, there's something for everyone at Drawing with Your Kids. Please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com, and click on the Drawing with Your Kids link at the top of the page and let the creativity flow. Drawing with Your Kids, where every stroke brings stories to life. Before we invite our guest into the studio, I would love to invite you to visit a very special website. It's clownswithoutborders.org. Clownswithoutborders.org. This is a group that I absolutely adore. I am part of Clowns Without Borders, and I had the honor of being part of the 2023 tour of El Salvador. I had so much fun joining with artists from all over the world to bring a smile to people who really needed it and really appreciated it too. And we would love for you to join us as a monthly Joy Maker. The Joy Makers, they're a family of people just like you who love to laugh and make other people feel good. So please take a moment and visit clownswithoutborders.org and consider joining me as a Joy Maker. Join us right now from the beautiful province of British Columbia in Canada. Our guests are back on Reading with Your Kids to celebrate the book number 4 in their Paws graphic novel series. It's called Hazel Has Her Hands Full. Please welcome back to the show Nathan Fairbairn and Michelle Assarasakorn. My friends, how are you?
Good,
I'm doing great.
you.
Thanks. It's good to see you again.
Yeah,
Great
thanks for having us again.
You are most welcome. Great to have you back. Nathan, as I understand it, you are the author of the series.
Yeah, I am the writer of the series. It's funny. I just listened to our earlier chat that we did in 2022, I believe it was. And I did a whole spiel about how I am the writer and Michelle's the illustrator, but we are both consider ourselves the authors of this book. Just because of the, highly collaborative back and forth nature of making comics and, how closely we work together and bounce ideas back and forth. So I'm a bit militant about this. I'm always advocating for Michelle as a co-author of the series.
Well, I am happy. I actually do remember that. And,
oh, good.
Good to remember, but I'm almost 100. So
yeah, and you do a lot of these interviews, so I don't blame you.
So tell us, Michelle, tell us about the story we're going to experience when we read and look at Hazel Has Her Hands Full.
Well, this story is quite special because it's going to focus on Hazel's condition. I'm not sure if we want to spoil anything or not, Nathan. You tell me where to stop, but she basically gets a side hustle to do, and she has to balance her relationship with her mother while doing it. And maybe Nathan might be able to, I might be able to send this off.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so this is the fourth book in the series, and every book of the series kind of focuses on one of the characters. So the first book is called Gabby Gets It Together, and the second is Mindy Makes Some Space, and the third one is Priya Puts Herself First, and the fourth one is Hazel Has Her Hands Full. And each book kind of gives us an opportunity to dive a bit deeper into a specific character, into their background. So we introduced the character of Hazel in the second book. She was a newcomer to the book. And readers haven't really seen as much of her personal life as they have the other characters, because she's kind of new and didn't get that strong introduction that the other three main characters got in the first book. When we were setting up the whole premise and the whole story. So it's an opportunity for readers to get to know Hazel. And yeah, it was a challenge to write this book, just because diversity and equity and inclusion is so important for me and Michelle. Hazel has a disability, a visible disability. That we haven't really talked about before. She uses a wheelchair. And it's always been, in previous books, we haven't specifically said why she uses a wheelchair. Because it was important, like, I wanted as many kids to feel represented and to be able to identify with the character as possible. And there's lots of reasons that you might use a wheelchair. And I thought I wanted to leave it open. But of course, when it comes time to tell Hazel's story, you have to tell her story. And so it became, we did a lot of research, and did a lot of reading and a lot of learning, and trying to make sure, that we represented her disability as accurately as possible and as respectfully as possible. And then after doing all the work, we went out and got authenticity reader and a sensitivity reader, and just, did our best to try to represent the condition, which is not to say that Hazel is defined by her condition, but it is a fact of her life, and we didn't want to gloss it over, and we didn't also want to dwell on it, but we wanted it to be dealt with respectfully. And yeah, so it was a writing challenge, but I'm really glad that we put in the effort to do it.
Well, we've talked a lot about the importance of representation here on the podcast, and the magic of books being mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And I'm delighted that we have a main character who uses a wheelchair. I've become much more sensitive to it since last year, when I ended up in a wheelchair for 3 months, and got a very different perspective of life and getting around, and how difficult it is getting around in a wheelchair on a sidewalk. And I thought, well, maybe the street would be better. And then I found out that streets are crusted, and I kept.
Yeah.
So, I love the fact that that Hazel is there and is representing other kids who have disabilities.
That was the hope. Yeah.
Michelle, was there any challenge illustrating Hazel, and did the wheelchair, offer you any special challenges?
Yes, a wheelchair is quite a technical drawing to complete. And so what I did was I drew wheelchair in as many angles as I could, and then I would copy and paste those into my drawings so that they were sort of like 3D models, but I drew them already, and then I would draw Hazel organically into the wheelchair depending on the scene. And so it was the first time I've actually spent a lot of time kind of figuring out angles and how to reuse shots. And so I think it worked out pretty well, because it kind of created a more solid object for a character to interact with. And that was the biggest challenge, I have to say, just trying to figure out how to represent a wheelchair accurately in every drawing, but keep it consistent. So I thought the solution worked out pretty well for us.
That's interesting. I love learning about the creative processes, especially since I have zero ability when it comes to visual arts. Can you talk a little bit more about that process that you used in creating the wheelchair and putting it into the different panels?
Well, I had some animation drawing experience where I used to rotate these drawings, these designs. I worked on Transformers for a little bit, actually. And so I had this experience in drawing shapes in 3 dimensions, and then I would rotate them, create these lines. Not to get too technical, but it would just enable different angles for you to see them. And then the characters, when you draw them, I guess because this book is so character driven already, I just got accustomed to drawing them. And so it was like combining 2 of these skill sets together. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
I mean, the process kind of started with me doing a lot of research and figuring out what is the chair to use for a child of Hazel's age and size, and then sent that off to Michelle. And it's like she says, you don't realize how complex how a wheelchair is, the parts of it, the way it folds, the way that it rotates, and and the different parts of it. There's a lot of different parts of it. So a lot of it was learning the vocabulary of what the casters are, the different aspects of the chair. And so I did that research for her, and then I sent it off to her, and she had to, I thought her solution was ingenious, because it's really hard to draw the same object literally hundreds of times and have it look consistent throughout the book. And so the way that she solved that by doing a bunch of key drawings and using those and kind of dropping them into place and warping them and manipulating them so that they fit the line art, and then drawing the line art onto that, I thought was brilliant. Yeah.
I took a lot of artistic liberty as well, because you can't really represent every part. And so whatever made sense for the drawing and for people to look at and say, oh, that's actually a real object that could work.
Because you're always simplifying with cartooning, right? Like when you draw a car, you're not doing a technical drawing of the car. You're doing what the car feels like in your sensibility, especially to the young audience.
Well, Nathan and Michelle, you both right. I think a lot of people don't understand that. They hear wheelchair and they have an idea, but they don't understand the variety, and they don't understand all the different parts, and they don't understand really how to use it and necessarily help somebody who is using a wheelchair. There was a funny story 5 or 6 years ago. My niece and her mom, we were going shopping, and her mom had hurt her leg. And so when we got to the mall, I said, let me get a wheelchair for you, and I brought it over and helped the mom into the wheelchair. And then I went to park the car, and I got back, and I found them, and they had only gone a very, very short distance. And I was surprised, because it was one of these outdoor malls and outlet malls, and I had to park about a mile away. And I said, "What did you find a store that you spent a lot of time in?" And they said, "No, it's just so hard moving this wheelchair." And here my little niece is trying to push her mom, and she'd forgotten to take the brakes off.
Oh.
Yeah.
That would be a problem.
That'll do it. Yeah.
So, Nathan, I really love that, getting the representation right and being sensitive is so important to you. Can you talk a little bit about why that is so important to you?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm a father of 2 children, and, we live in a very diverse neighborhood in a very diverse city, and I think a very diverse country. And I just, as a parent, I'm always kind of trying to teach my kids the value of empathy and, viewing life from other people's perspectives. And, I just think I think all parents kind of want that from their kids. They want their kids to have open minds and open hearts, and I think that reading, especially early, is a big tool for teaching kids that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know, it wasn't really a thing that we talked about, or it was just a thing that was like, yeah, well, of course, like, I'm not gonna have a cast of 4 kids and have them all look exactly like me or exactly like Michelle, or, like we wanted to, have as many kids be able to pick up this book and see part of themselves or some of themselves reflected in those main characters. Because cartoons are so much they're like archetypes, right? Like you can see a cartoon and it's such a simple drawing often. It's a couple dots for eyes and a line for a mouth. And we project ourselves onto these really simplified, icons of character. And I think that's beautiful and powerful with comics. And so, yeah, we wanted to have as many icons and as many, kinds of people and faces and kinds of lives, reflected in our books as possible, just to give as many kids a chance to pick up the book and go, this kid looks like me. And I've had that, and it's an amazing experience when like a librarian, messaged me on, I think it was Instagram, and she had this young, Korean American girl, and, she picked up Mindy Makes Some Space, and she said, she looks like me. And sure enough, Mindy is Korean Canadian, so close enough. But like she reached out to me to tell me that, and she has a picture of the girl holding the book to her chest, and it's wonderful. It's great to be able to see yourself, in the media you consume and in the stories that you hear.
Yeah. Michelle, can you remind us what Paws is all about? What this group of young people are all about, and what ties them together?
Paws is a story about friendship, business, young entrepreneurs trying to problem solve and set aside their differences for a united cause. I think it's a story about just like figuring childhood together, like childhood and schooling and hobbies together as kids. I feeling connected as kids. I just feel like nowadays everything's just online on social media. So it's nice to have such a grounded book with kids just being kids and figuring things out without adults. At least this was sort of like how I grew up with my childhood. So it's nice being able to mirror this experience and keep it alive for the younger generations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, you're right. Me and my friends are all ancient, but when we get together, we remember running the streets together and, having our parents send us out first thing in the morning and telling us not to come back home until the street lights come on, and having to be out there and solve some problems and, well, cause some problems. And, those memories and those friendships come immediately back. You don't have to see somebody for a couple of decades, and then you get together. It's like, hey, do you remember that time we did? Oh, has the statute of limitations run? Yeah, we can talk about that. So I do think that that's missing. I don't know what it's like in Canada, but it's especially missing here in the States. I read a story not too long ago where a mom was arrested because she let her 10-year-old walk to school.
I saw that same story.
Yeah,
it blew my mind.
Yeah.
It's great. I was walking to school when I was in first grade.
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I think they said it was a mile. And I went back on Google Maps and I checked how far it was from my elementary school to my childhood home, and it was 1.4 miles. And I walked it every day. It sounds like a cliche, but I did in like minus 20 degrees Celsius, and because I'm from Canada and it gets cold up north there, and no problem, right? It was just everyone did.
Yeah, and it was uphill both ways.
Exactly. So there is an element of the Paws, which, just in case we haven't set up the premise enough, it's about these girls who set up a dog walking club. They become dog walkers in their neighborhood. In the first book, you meet them all, and they're all very different kids, and they have nothing in common except for the fact that they all are obsessed with animals, and none of them can have a pet for various different reasons. And so they kind of fall backwards into this dog walking scheme, and they start this dog walking club. So, I mean, it's interesting in that it's it's really successful. Like the kids seem to love it. And I've had multiple kids reach out to me with them trying to start up their own dog walking club, which is fantastic. But I've also heard from a lot of kids who have, been thwarted in their efforts to set up a dog walking club, either because their parents don't support it or, like who wants their 11-year-old walking around, a neighborhood with there's a lot of, I think, fear at the moment. But kids want to do it. And I think the fact that the kids love these books speaks to the fact that there's something about the idea of, getting together with actual friends in person and going out into the world and getting in adventures and solving problems really speaks to something I think that a lot of kids might be missing. And that might be why, the Babysitters Club series is still such a massive success, even though it's not, at least in my world, as much of a thing as it was when I was growing up. When I was growing up, everyone babysat. I babysat, my sister babysat, my friends babysat, and none of my kids' friends babysit. Oh, actually, one of my daughter's friends babysits, but she's now 18 almost, 17. Whereas I think I did my first babysitting job, I was 12. My sister was babysitting me from the age of like 8 or whatever she was. But kids love those stories today, even though it's not such a common thing. And I think it speaks to that desire that kids probably have to do things in person and go out into the world and have some independence and have some agency. And, so in a lot of ways, Paws, like the Babysitters Club now, is kind of an aspirational story because, I could see it working, and I'm thrilled that some kids are trying to make it work. But I think it's a bit of a stretch in today's world.
Well, it certainly is. If people are freaking out when a 10-year-old walks to school, I don't know what they're going to react to if they're out there doing a business and an 11-year-old walking a dog. Although it shouldn't be that way. Michelle, we've talked a lot, and you brought it up about kids' lives are so overscheduled, I think. Kids they go from school to an after-school program to a dance program and they don't have any, it seems, free time for themselves or unsupervised time.
It's true. I feel like the boredom, kids are almost not allowed to be bored anymore. And I feel like I could attribute my creativity to being very bored all the time when I was young. That just gave me a lot of opportunity to explore creatively in my mind and practice on paper drawing. But I agree with you. There's a whole lot of overscheduling, and also a whole lot of retreat into this sort of online life that's so addictive and creates this like false sense of connection, I find. It's not truly struggling, and you don't really overcome things like you would physically outside or interacting with real people. I really love Paws for this because it seems like every conflict is actually a face-to-face conflict, or dealing with animals and parents. Like those are really important to learn during your childhood.
Yeah, absolutely.
Real relationships as opposed to online relationships. Yeah.
I'm curious, and this goes out to either one of you. We recently had the author and illustrator of the Dork Diaries on, and they were celebrating book 16 in their series. Wow. Is there an overarching vision for the series? Are we thinking 16, 20, 30 books, or are you guys tiring of the idea?
Well, we're just finishing up our 5th book right now. We're about a month away from wrapping up book number 5, which is really, really good. And I can tell you that there will be at least 2 more after that. and then we'll see. It's really fun to do. It's a book I started because, the concept came to me because I wanted to share my love of comics with my daughter, who, when I started the book, was the same age as these characters. But she's now 17 and, no longer, the target demographic for these stories. She still reads them, and she's very sweet and supportive of her old dad. But, but Michelle has a young daughter. So there might be a passing of the torch where, I might, step back and Michelle might take over the writing as well as the as the drawing. So yeah, I mean, as long as kids want to read these books, we'll probably be telling them in some way or another.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Something to look forward to. Let's find out where we can go to find out more about both of you. Michelle, is there a website we can find out more about you and your work?
Yep. My website, which is currently getting updated, is www.msassyk.com, and I could be found with the same handle on Instagram. I've been on hiatus posting or updating just because life has been so busy. As Nathan said, I have a young toddler and she's growing, she's getting into preschool. So I've been getting a lot of my time back. So all stuff will be updated next year.
Wonderful. And Nathan, where can we go to find out more about you and all of your creativity?
I'm not very online anymore, but I have a website, which is nathanfairbairn.com. And I have that Instagram handle, Nathan Fairbairn on Instagram. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I find myself as I get more gray in the beard and I find myself, retreating to more, real world friendships and real world connections and spending less time on social media.
You were preaching to the choir because other than promoting the podcast, there's not a whole lot going on. I had a wonderful year of travel this year. We went to Italy, Ireland, Scotland, the UK, Northern Ireland.
Oh, wow.
Just got back from the Dominican Republic. And I think I posted two or three pictures online. My beautiful wife does a good job of keeping everybody up to date on what we're doing. But you're right. Those real world friendships are so much more important.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I'm really happy that Paws is helping young kids understand that too.
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, when you write these books and you have all these ideas and these ambitions of how it'll, help kids and enlighten things for kids and teach them lessons but overall, they are funny. That's the main thing I'm trying to do is entertain kids. And if I can sneak some vegetables in with the, with their meal, I don't hit them over the head with the life lessons, but I've had a lot of parents and say that, they really appreciate that it's not just going from one joke to another joke. There's usually a moral.
Wonderful. Well, you have an open invitation to come back and celebrate book 5, 6, 7. As long as I'm here, you guys are welcome.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate the support.
Thank you so much, Jed.
Yeah. Michelle, Nathan, thanks so much for being back on Reading with Your Kids.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Hey there, families! Are you looking for an exciting way to bond and learn together? Look no further than our STEM is Family Fun video series. Join us as we explore the fascinating world of STEM through hands-on activities right in your own home. Our series features lessons from experts at renowned institutions like the San Diego Children's Discovery Museum, the National Children's Museum in Washington, D.C., and Children's Museum Houston. From making homemade rainbow bridges to creating an oboe out of a straw, there's something for everyone in the family to enjoy. So grab your lab coats and get ready for an adventure. Go to readingwithyourkids.com and click on the STEM is Family Fun link at the top of the page and let the learning and laughter begin. STEM is Family Fun, where learning and bonding go hand in hand. Join us right now from the beautiful state of North Carolina. Our guest is returning to the show to celebrate. Her brand new book is called Arnie the Armadillo Goes Backpacking in Brazil. Please welcome back to the show, Eden.
Hello.
Hey, Eden, how are you?
I'm doing great. Enjoying the roller coaster weather that the East Coast has to offer.
Yeah, Eden was just telling me there was a tornado in her area. How close did it come to your home?
We had a warning until about 10:30, and when I stepped outside, there was a lot of sticks on our porch that weren't there beforehand. But it moved pretty quickly. So I was out and driving about an hour later. So, really, it's hilarious how quick the weather moves here.
Yes. I don't know if I told you this. I made a living, as people listening know, doing educational magic shows for 35 years, and have toured North Carolina a couple of times. And the very first time I was touring, I was in a rural school, this old type school where there's just one corridor and classes off to either side of the corridor.
Yep.
I walk into the school, and everybody is in that main corridor in the fetal position. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? And they looked at me like, you don't know what a tornado drill is? And I'm like, no, we don't do those in Boston. I'm sorry.
Oh, goodness. Yeah, I love it. It keeps you on your toes here.
It does. So tell us about this new book.
Yeah, so last time I was here, I was talking to y'all about my first book, Arnie the Armadillo Goes to Antarctica, which is a little illustrated journey following Arnie the Armadillo from Arizona to visit his friend Albert in Antarctica. In case you haven't guessed the theme, for anyone that needs a reminder, it is to engage kids with vocabulary that start with the letter A, and that was begging for sequels. So I kind of, the way I had approached it as an author was starting off with the first book, seeing how well the concept was received, because there was not a lot that I could find on the market that tackled vocabulary, in particular, some that was a little more complex. And I wanted to see if it was well received before I kept going. And I had so many people asking for a second book, I decided to just go for it. And that brought about Arnie the Armadillo Does Backpacking in Brazil, which covers vocabulary that starts with the letter B.
Wonderful. Wonderful. What a great idea. And boy, you can get 26 books out of this series.
I can. I mean, I'm out of ideas once we reach 26, but yeah.
Oh, I mean, we could go CH and SH and all those compound sounds. Yeah, no, absolutely. The second book is a little bit longer. I went a little longer this time, and we also made a little bit more of a robust gallery of vocabulary at the back. So it was really cool being able to write a book with the learnings from book one kind of in mind of like, what did parents really enjoy? What did kids really enjoy? How did they engage with it? And how can I take those learnings and apply it to the second book to make it even better? Because hopefully all of our stuff gets better as we grow. So now, how did you do that market research? Was it just word of mouth, or did you do some kind of formal survey?
For the concept itself, I did mostly a lot of chatting as well as just research on literary development. So I studied English. I am not in education. That is one of the questions that I get a lot when I talk to people, is they ask if I was in English ed, and I'm not, but I did study English. So vocabulary, literacy, and literary development are really important to me. And I just did a lot of research on it, as well as consulted some teachers on just their perspective on tackling that subject and kind of how to best, approach it. So a little bit of both, but all very informal.
We've talked a lot here on the podcast about the fact that if you read 20 minutes, read to your kids 20 minutes a day, every day, by the time they get to kindergarten and first grade, they will have heard over 800,000 more words than their peers who weren't read to. Talk a little bit about why it's so important that kids hear these words and develop that vocabulary.
Absolutely. So, going into the concept as a whole, I did, as I mentioned, I did some research, and one particular article by the NIH that I was really interested into was, they were talking about how kids learn best kind of within that age range of about 2 to 5, which is what Arnie the Armadillo is targeted for. Now, a lot of people kind of take that concept and say, okay, let's teach a child a foreign language around this time, which is great. You absolutely can. Their brains are wired and just very sponge-like for learning vocabulary. But that same concept can be applied to learning English vocabulary as well. So what when they're so susceptible to learning those different words, having it introduced to them in a fun way, like, we're not thinking like boring vocabulary primers. We're like, this is a story. Like, they're not knowing that they're learning, they're hearing, and at the same time seeing. The biggest example I like to use in book 1 was we used the word Arnie was ascending in an airplane. So the picture shows Arnie moving upwards on an airplane seat. So even if the kids aren't fully understanding that what the word ascending is, which I think we could all agree is a more complex vocabulary word for an age 2 to 5, they're seeing what that word is in action. So even if they take it 2 or 3 times to, hear and read the story, they're not getting lost along the way. They're hearing the words, they're seeing what Arnie is doing, and they can still put 2 and 2 together as they're learning these more complex vocabulary words. And we kind of brought back that same concept to Arnie, goes backpacking in Brazil, where, you're pairing all of these different words with pictures so that they can see what is happening if it is a more complicated word.
Yeah. Now, I'm imagining there are people out there listening to this, maybe some educators who are thinking, ascending. You read the word ascending in a picture book, but that's not that thing that all the authors are supposed to look at in terms of what words to use. What would you say to that person?
I mean, I am of the firm belief that kids are so much smarter than we give them credit for sometimes, and all they need is, the right tools. So, what I've learned, especially with book 1, where that one did have the word ascending in it. Obviously, a lot of kids don't really know what that is, but I've read it so many times to kids, it's never stopped them from understanding what is happening in the story. And if there is something that they don't understand, then we talk about it afterwards. And it provides a really good opportunity for a parent or a caregiver to sit down with that child and say, okay, we just looked at this, like, let's look at this picture. Like, what is that in the background? Or like, in a picture, Arnie is painting an avocado. So and the word avocado is not in the story, but it's in the picture. So we can point at it and say, do you know what that is? They can say yes or no, or yes, it's an avocado. I love avocados, and we can talk about it. So it really provides that opportunity for conversation that fuels just not only literary development, but just that natural curiosity that I think that kids have, and really helps foster that into just great conversations. A lot of the parents I've talked to with the books, that's what they particularly like, is that it does open doors. First of all, it's the pictures and the stories are clear enough that the kids can enjoy them by themselves, but they can enhance that experience by sitting down with their child, reading it, looking at the back of the gallery and going like, oh, did you see this, Arctic seal? Where did you see that Arctic seal? Practice recalling, and all these different ways you can engage with it. So I would always say, don't be afraid to push those limits, because the kids can definitely handle it. Like, I have the most fun with kindergartners because they are so into it. And they definitely understand. Like, I've never had a child confused at the end, even with big words like ascending in the story. Like, they get it.
Yeah. Well, I got grief when my kids were younger, and I would talk to them like an adult, as I would talk to an adult, and use those words, and feel like they can't understand that. And then my son would turn around and just use it back in the proper way. And I really want to encourage families. You can be playful, and you don't. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Be stern, but use complex vocabulary with your kids. They're going to pick it up. They're going to understand it. And then saying picture books are meant to be read. Picture books are meant to be experienced by a kid with an adult. That's why you will find more complex vocabulary in a picture book than you would in an early reader, the first readers that kids will have.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I mean, ultimately, I think that's the mark of really good illustration, is how are they showing what's on the page, and how are they using the illustration to support, as I said, as a writer, like, I am diehard, love the writing side of things, but especially being in the children's book space, I've really come to appreciate really strong that complementary art skills that come alongside it, where you really have to use those pictures to help them just further the message that the written word has to offer. And when the two come together really well, like it's great. And it works just really smoothly.
Yeah. Yeah. Now tell me, you're in North Carolina. I don't typically associate armadillos with North Carolina. I might be wrong, but where did Arnie come from? Where did you fall in love with Arnie?
Yeah, you know, a lot of people ask me that when I'm at like author events. They're like, why an armadillo? And like once again, I studied English. I've been writing essay questions to the question of why did the author do this? Why do you think they did that? And I wish I had a really dramatic story to tell you, but ultimately it came down to I was writing it based off of a letter of the alphabet. So that narrowed it down to animals that started with A. And then I wanted it to be a lesser known animal. So that kind of ruled out another good chunk of them. And that kind of left me with some options, and I just really liked the idea of an armadillo. I thought it would translate really well in illustration. I thought it would be memorable. I also thought since it wasn't as well known, once again, my goal was to provide, some sort of, I wanted Arnie to be a good talking point for caregivers and their kids. So, that's kind of why I landed on Arnie and Armadillo. I just thought it would be cute and a lot of potential. And, I sent Arnie to Brazil in book 2 because I really wanted him to be rolled up into a ball. And I thought, oh, what better way to do that than, in a soccer game? So, it's a little shallow, but like that's kind of how it played out. So,
some of the best ideas are simple and silly ones.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what animals did you consider and say no to?
So, transparently, the second book was not going to be Arnie the Armadillo. When I came up with the concept at book 1, it was going to be a different animal per letter because obviously Armadillo only starts with A. But as I learned throughout that first year, so many people recognized Arnie and there was so much recognition of him as the main character of the first one. I was like, I can't get rid of him. So originally the concept for B was going to be a bison. I was thinking of having like a Bella the bison, does ballet or something, a little bit, just a different animal. But I eventually had to change plans because I was like, I can't get rid of Arnie. There are still bison in the story, by the way, just a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I went through, I said a couple of different concepts, but when you evaluate things and you know that people recognize the armadillo, it'd be really hard to get rid of him. So instead we sent him to Brazil with his brother. So.
I love it. I love it. And Brazil, did you pick Brazil just because it began with B, or do you have a love and an interest in that country?
I mean, it's a beautiful country. So obviously the first story was in Antarctica, which was a lot of snow, which is beautiful, but a little less scenic in some ways. So I think for book 2, I really wanted him to branch out a little, and I wanted a space where I felt I could provide a really just rich illustrations, and that background in Brazil is gorgeous. I think I just loved when I was researching the country and some of the potential spots that Arnie could go. I was like, I think it would just translate really well. He actually does stop by Boston. That's where his brother lives. So, he does spend a few pages in Boston, which is how he gets to Brazil, which don't ask any questions how. It's a children's book.
Okay.
Realism goes out the window every so often. But I also have had a few friends who are from Brazil, so I was able to chat with them and really get an idea of, some things that we did include to just introduce kids to some things from Brazil along the way. So I was really excited to be able to do that. I know I'm going on Arnie's launch tour for the second book in March, and I've got a friend who does brigadeiro, so a Brazilian chocolate truffle, that we're going to bring with us to some of the stops so that kids can try a little Brazilian treat, when they come to visit. So it provided a lot of really good, I think, not only literary enrichment opportunities, but just learning about, a different culture, and some of the small things that we can from it. So overall, it felt it was a really, it provided a lot of opportunity.
Yeah. Well, we have a really large Brazilian population here
Mm-hmm.
in Massachusetts, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
That would they hop on one of those flights that goes
Yeah.
back? Oh,
Yeah. 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 No, he had to meet his brother somewhere, and I was like, Boston. Yeah.
I was actually surprised to learn a couple of years ago that Portuguese is actually the second most used language in Massachusetts. I always assumed that it was Spanish, but it's not. It's Portuguese.
I did not know that.
Yeah. We have a large Brazilian and Cape Verdean population throughout the state.
Nice. So I didn't know that, but that only helps my book, so I like it.
Now, tell me, no one surprises the rolled up Arnie as a soccer ball and uses it in a match, do they?
No, you have to read the book.
Oh.
No, it's, yeah, you have to read the book. You'll have to read the book. I can guarantee you, though, no armadillos were harmed in the making of this book.
Excellent. That is wonderful. Where else is Arnie going to travel to?
People have been asking me about C, which I'm like, y'all, I just published a second book. Like, it takes time to put these things together, so not quite there yet. I'm not sure where he wants to go for C. So many people have said Canada that it's kind of making me feel like I shouldn't send him there because it's too predictable. But, yeah, I've had a few options thrown out that I'm like, I think, I want to try to diversify where he goes and how he gets there. And I don't know. I think, yeah, since I haven't written it yet, it's still work in progress. But if anybody has any suggestions, they can DM me on Instagram, and I will take it into consideration.
Well, the first thought that came up was China, but you might want to save that for the compound or the blended sounds. Cameroon would be able to give you a chance to Africa.
Yeah, I kind of also liked the idea of the Caribbean. I've had a few people mention that, and I'm like, he hasn't really, he has been to the beach, cause like there's a beach in Brazil, but like he hasn't really been to an island. So like there could be some island vibes, but yeah, there's still room and opportunity. I would like to at least kind of get A, B, and C solidified at some point, but being a self-published author, I do rely on on sales in order to fund future books. So if anybody here listening would like to see a book C, then please buy A and B.
Yes, A and B leads to C. We should tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Arnie and purchase a book.
Yeah, you can go to either, if you're on Instagram, at Arnie the Armadillo, and there is a link in my bio that will take you to my website, which is www.meetarnie.com. And on that main page, you can see all the different ways that you can purchase it, either online or if you live here in the North Carolina area, there's also in-store options. But of course, I always have online options as well. You'll see a lot of them are from small businesses. I really do like for people to be able to purchase from a small business if they can, but they are also on Amazon if you just absolutely need that 2-day shipping. But I will always encourage my small business partners on my website first.
Yeah. We've had a great time speaking to the author of Arnie the Armadillo Goes Backpacking in Brazil. Our guest has been Eden Estabrook. Eden, thanks so much for being back with us.
Thanks for having me.
Right now, we'd like to share a quick preview of one of the podcasts in the Reading with Your Kids podcast family. It's called Guardians of the Game. It's based on D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. You're going to love this podcast. You and your kids are going to love this podcast. Check it out.
220 years ago, there was a great war. Family fought family. Neighbor fought neighbor. Good fought evil. And the ending of that war was marked with the banishment of a being known only as the Destroyer. Society began to rebuild and was blessed with a long-lasting peace known as the Age of Tranquility. 70 years ago, that peace was challenged as a being known as the Nameless God threatened to erase the world and replace it with one of her own. Heroes rose and brought her and her generals down. This event inspired thousands all over the continent to train themselves as the next generation of adventurers, and the Age of Heroics began. 30 years ago, the new generation of heroes were put to the test by a multiplanar event that once again threatened reality as it was known. Beings called Weavers were created by strange magic, and those Weavers took it upon themselves to face the coming challenges. When this threat was eliminated, few remained who remembered the details of it, and the Weavers' power vanished from the world. Evils across the globe took the opportunity to rise in the absence of power, and the Age of Oppression began. This age was short-lived, as one group of heroes had risen to the top of the food chain, the Trifecta. Consisting of a wizard prodigy known as Joffrey the Unstoppable, a devilishly powerful sorceress by the name of Makara the Indomitable, and a master of the physical and martial arts known as Arthur the Unbreakable, the Trifecta quickly became the greatest heroes the world had ever known. Whenever a great evil rose, they were there to stop it. Not in a matter of weeks or months, but in a matter of days, or often hours. Within a year, the Age of Oppression was over. With the Trifecta active, heroics and villainy died out. What villain would dare stand against the sheer effective force of the Trifecta? From bandit warlords all the way to ancient dragons, no evil was safe from their wrath. And what purpose was there to train heroes when an undying adventuring party kept the world safe from every threat? 1 year ago, the Trifecta vanished without a trace, and suddenly, the world realized what had happened. A vacancy of power was opened for both good and evil, and a mad scramble began. Villains who had been lying secretly in wait rose to accomplish their goals, and heroes who were not prepared struggled to battle against them. The past age was given the name the Age of Diminishment, and the world only then began to restore itself to natural order in the absence of its apex predators, the Trifecta. This is where our story begins. In the chaos of a world caught between good and evil, but neither side powerful enough to stake a solid claim. Chaos rules the streets, adventurers are at a premium, and monsters run rampant. More than ever, the world needs heroes to fight back against the swelling tide of darkness. Lines between good and evil are skewed, might begins to make right, and ideals and beliefs are challenged for the first time in decades. Welcome to the Age of Dissonance.
We hope you've enjoyed that preview of Guardians of the Game. It is one of the podcasts in the Reading with Your Kids podcast family. I think you and your kids are going to love it. It is absolutely a family-friendly, D&D-based podcast that is it's just a lot of fun, and we think you'll enjoy it. Please check it out. It's available wherever you find your favorite podcast. Of course, we love the iHeartRadio app. We love Spotify, Amazon Music. Good Pods, we love all the places you can find our podcast. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids, and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. In the meantime, we'd love it if you would connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, @readingwithyourkids on Instagram, and @JedleyMagic on Twitter. Of course, you can check out all of our Drawing with Your Kids and our STEM is Family Fun videos on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. And of course, you are most welcome to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with our guests, Nathan Fairbairn and Michelle Assarasakorn. Please be sure to check out Hazel Has Her Hands Full, a great graphic novel number 4 in the Paws graphic novel series. Also want to thank Eden Estabrook. Please be sure to check out Arnie the Armadillo Goes Backpacking in Brazil. I want to thank my fantastic team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.